Hello guys, my name is Adam Shadow and welcome to the third video about the magnificent machine behind me, the ultimate storage system. Let's take a closer look. If you remember my latest video about it, I showed this design here. I'm currently on the ever busy Prototech creative multiplayer server, and when I showed this to some of the other guys from our server, they told me to use an uneven number of blocks in the center so it looks nicer. That made me think, okay, if I can put one more block, or at least half a block of a distance between me and the buttons, that means that I could potentially put more buttons into this single slice. And that was exactly what I did. However, this storage wasn't exactly perfect for that because we add this nasty delay here of the observers every time I may increase the length, so it's not just like 2 game ticks for each slice of distance, it's like 4 or 8 or something way more. And these wires here are also not great because I could probably use redstone for this. The reason why I could use redstone is because this activated really rarely. So, like, normally this is not on. It only turns on when someone presses the button. That means that if I would just use a line of redstone dust, for example, instead of the 2 lines of rails here, I could reduce the time it takes for the box to reach the player. And also, I thought about how to make this distance here shorter, not because it will make the transportation much faster, but to save resources, save tile entities, and I also thought about how to make this vertical transport more efficient, because the way it worked before, when this dropper got activated, all of these droppers got activated. And that's not exactly perfect, because that causes a lot of unnecessary activations. So, after a lot of thought and some inspiration from a guy called Policy, I hope I spelled that correctly, I made this design. This one, as you can see, is much shorter. It uses still mostly rail lines. Actually, I think these two can be replaced by redstone, but I wasn't too confident using it in this design, and I knew this wasn't going to be a major design. And here I already used some redstone just to make the signal travel from this button to the required slice faster. It's also faster because you don't need so many observers even in these rail parts, so, which is a huge advantage. These slices, or I don't know how to call it, slice parts of the storage or cells, I don't know what would be the correct term, are much better right now because they are using the information if the sorter is letting items through this hopper to activate this transfer or enable this transfer from this line of observers that would probably go something like this. It could be either 4 or 6 game tick clock. And when this piston extends, it starts to trigger all of these droppers, of course, except this one here. Therefore, it reduces the activations necessary by a lot. It also does not have the disadvantage of my old shulker box filling machines that it would it could permanently lock these droppers if two clocks would activate next to each other at the wrong time, since they are basically the timings are basically given by this line of observers, not these pistons. These pistons just enable or disable the transfer between this observer and this door. This saves a lot of unnecessary activations, keeps the whole thing extremely compact. It's not as compact as it could theoretically be, because as you can see, we have here 7 droppers, not 6. If you remember, I originally used 6 droppers to represent one double chest, because we agreed that having one double chest of storage wouldn't be enough, or one double chest of shulker boxes obviously wouldn't be enough. However, due to the design of this system, I needed to have here a certain height, and I also needed this offset of one block just to be able to activate this dropper right here. And it also enables me to transfer signal easier through this thing. And having a bit more capacity, I don't think is a huge disadvantage, because if you look at this part right here, you have here this width of 4 blocks, and you also need the rails to go like this. So even if I would somehow move this hopper here, it would still not help me at all. Like, I couldn't make this slice thinner. Therefore, I just added some more capacity and made the whole thing way simpler and more reliable. I also used a bit of a different shulker box sorter because of the use of more dropper lines to send the items that were used for the sorting of the boxes away. I could move the block that was originally here down here, because one side of the hopper was unlocked due to the design. Therefore, this slice is way thinner. However, it is not perfect. As you can see, it still has the same interface right here. And it has also a tiny disadvantage. This was shown to me by Policia, and someone even made this nice showcase of it. For me, I can't remember who it was. And as you can see here, this setup right here does the same thing as this used to do in the old design. However, it reduces the delay by 2 game ticks, which is quite an advantage. First of all, I wasn't sure if this was even possible, because I tried this setup. This wouldn't make sense if you think about the update order of Rails, because if you power this rail, it should theoretically power this one, then this one, and go like this. But it does not. For some reason, you have to power this one, then it powers all of these, and then powers this one as last for some reason. I'm not sure why it's done that way, but they fixed that in the newer versions. So I decided to improve upon this. Since I knew I have one more block that I could use here, and I figured out that I could place these showcase blocks because these blocks are very important. Someone even asked me why these even exist. They show you what blocks are stored. Like this white wool would represent this button here, and this one. You get the idea. Or you could even do it the opposite way. It doesn't matter. It just represents what items are stored in the slice. So I came up with this design. This is an extremely dense design. This is 7 different items per half slice. That means 14 different items per slice. I even thought this wasn't even going to work at all. If you remember my old button panel down here, it had only 6 different items per half slice. This one has 7. Because I used trapdoors, which enabled me to have a bit better access to all of the items, and especially the observers. And I could also afford to use a longer design, since reducing the distance you need to walk and the let's say parts of the machine or blocks used in the machine is extremely important, and doing that by increasing the density is probably the easiest and most effective way to do it, because it makes it easier to access blocks and makes it way easier to build. Here I was a lot more confident with the use of redstone. These buttons here are just to show how the redstone would be aligned in the normal storage, because this one is just one slice. I will need one next to it to show it. Here I used rails directly from this button here to this part. Therefore I basically made the transfer of these white boxes the same speed as it was in the previous designs. So if you just want to take out several boxes of the most common items, it's still the same speed. I might be getting coronavirus. Then I used a quite sophisticated way of transferring the signal upwards with a lot of doors and observers. This is obviously not as fast as the previous designs. However, with the increased density, it's probably well worth it. And also, we are commonly just going to use one item from probably even each slice, or maybe half slice, since if we make this storage 100 blocks long, you will likely just use 100 different items in most redstone builds. Like, you need one solid block, one of each of the redstone parts, which there are 36, let's say, with the rails, and slime blocks, like probably 50 redstone parts we will likely use, which is quite a small number. And when you add that we have another 50 more blocks where we could fit like various types of blocks, like glass panes, glass blocks, one type or several types of solid blocks, maybe some wood type to craft something. It becomes really efficient, and you can also see that on many people's storage systems, if you look up look them up on YouTube, that they don't even use more than 100 different items. So the chance of someone coming into the storage and having to switch the item type is very low. Like, I would guess it's like 1%, maybe even less. Like, so even though this is a bit slower than the original design, the advantage certainly pays for it. And even if it takes like 1 or 2 game ticks longer, that's probably the amount of time it will take you more to run through the storage. So, in my opinion, this is worth it. Here, I was also a bit more clever about the placement of these showcase blocks. I put these most common ones down here, right underneath you. So if you just need redstone components, for example, you can just run through the storage looking underneath you, like you could in the older design. And then I put the more rare items here at the top. You can still easily see them, like you can do with these wool blocks. Like, I have no problem of looking up and running through a hallway of these. I also put the player on some cobble walls, so it's easier to reach. Of course, in the future we can replace most of these trapdoors with note blocks. We cannot replace this one here. We can replace all of the other ones, which makes it much more comfortable to use. I was also a bit more experienced now with placing the redstone lines and rail lines together. Like you can see, for example, here, I didn't even use any dropper, any not droppers, but observers or repeaters here. So the time is quite low from this point to this point, unlike in the previous designs. I did the same for this one here. I needed one observer. Here I only needed one repeater. Here I needed just 2 repeaters, and here I also needed just 2. So I improved the efficiency of these wires a lot, and like I said, if you are just clicking to activate this, this will have pretty much no impact on the overall server performance. If in this wire I had to do something special, no, I did not forget to place blocks in front of these repeaters. This is fully on purpose, because if I would place the 2 blocks there, the redstone would reach up to here, which would cause 5 slices to be activated at once from this wire. By making it 2 blocks shorter, I save myself the effort to have to put an observer or another repeater in between, and I just used 2 pieces of redstone. And here I did pretty much the same. I obviously added the 2 blocks and used another piece of rail for this part. This is also a bit different than in the previous designs, because this part, due to the sheer width of these wires next to each other, had to be made longer than a rail line can reach. I had to use again redstone. Here I used a different setup. The way it's done right here is basically that there is a signal strength of, I think it's this 15. Yeah, 15 here, and here is 14, and also here is 14. So if this block gets powered by, for example, this observer, this one changes its state, but this one does not, which basically makes the redstone act similar to a rail line and allows me to transfer signal. I don't know how many blocks, it's like 12, 10 blocks, without having to use any delay in between. I also use this part here to make these three observers here activate faster than or earlier than the rail line, because this one has to be the first, then this one, and then the rail line. And in this configuration, it basically allowed me to do that without adding any delay to the system. So this, like I said, this first or most commonly used item still gets delivered to you at the same rate as in the previous design, and 2 game ticks faster than in the older design. Yet the whole contraption has a much higher density. Now I want to take a couple minutes to talk about why I chose this design. Well, I will show you how it works. And then it in fact does work. There are many ways to build storage systems in Minecraft, and many ways to build an interface for storage. So I decided to use this exact one, not because I just flipped a die and went according to that, but because I needed to fulfill a lot of requirements at the same time, and I needed to optimize the storage in many ways. The first important requirement was that the other Prototech players came up with, that we didn't want to use coal-based storage like the one I showed in my first video, this one, because it was difficult to use that in our tests with several people at once. Even if we would somehow just type in a binary number to get a box, that's also too tricky for most people. Like, not everyone has years of experience converting decimal to binary, or even if you would use some decimal control panel, it would still be a bit tricky to convert that to binary using some machinery. Therefore, I need to build something that at least resembles a chest hole, in the way that several people can use several independent parts of the machine. Like, we didn't need two outputs for one item type, but at least for different items, sections, maybe at least like here it's done for 7 different items. We have different outputs, but we wanted to also keep the advantages of Ray's and Archeon's design from the past that used a shulker box display like the ones I built here. Here I built 6 of them in a slice, and here I even managed to get 8 of them in one slice. However, as you can see, this is a little bit too difficult to use. Like, even with creative, it's really hard to reach these boxes. Like, you can barely do it. And this has a pathetic density. Like, for 1000 different items, this would be 250 blocks long, which is problematic because you cannot stand at one end of it and load the other one, especially in the future versions. Of course, in 1.12 we can use chunk loading, but in the future versions that would be a big issue, and I don't think it would even fit into the spawn chunks. So you would kind of need to have someone to load the machine, for example, from the center, or several accounts that would load it, which has which is really tricky to do and really annoying since we are not using any modifications to the server version, so we cannot just place an empty player somewhere where we wanted him. We actually need a real account for AFKing. And the second issue was we also needed to reduce the lag by as much as we can. Therefore, I'm using here dropper lines. This can be done also with hopper lines. But dropper lines have the advantage that you don't need to add some complicated locking mechanism to them. So we can basically make this machine as laggy as we need the input to be fast. So if we want to, for example, keep the 9000 boxes per hour limit, which is basically the limit of transfer of one of these hoppers, we can activate these droppers in 8 game tick clock. This would likely be similar, maybe even worse, to just having a covered hopper line. However, this won't likely be the case, and we will certainly build some pre-sorting setup that would check if the items are going through at the maximum rate or what, or maybe we would even do a complicated design that would determine the rate of transfer we need, and therefore we could adjust the lagginess of the machine to that. We obviously have all hoppers that we can lock except this one. This one could be locked with a complicated locking mechanism, but that's a little bit of overkill since there will be only like 800 of these, and these ones are covered. They are facing into a block where they cannot put items into it, so they're not even trying to do that. And if we consider that the machine is running, it basically has to have these hoppers unlocked anyway. So it could be done, but it would likely increase the transfer time of the signal, which would be probably way more annoying than like 2 or 3 milliseconds per tick than this requires from the server. Like, if you remember my video where I tested like 10,000 locked hoppers, though those were causing quite low lag. Like, for this machine we would use 2000 locked hoppers and 1000 unlocked ones. That's really not much. Like, that's 10 times, that's 5 times less. So yeah, we will likely not even reach like 10 milliseconds per tick. Oh, probably with 5 with all of the hoppers being unlocked. And obviously these droppers are not doing anything. And as you could see in the previous video, but not powered droppers which are empty are incredibly lag efficient. Like 70,000 of those were like 0.2 milliseconds per tick, so pretty much all of this storage would never exceed 1 millisecond per tick just from the droppers. Of course, if you fill droppers, that's a whole new story. Because filled tiled entities have to store their uh, parameters of the items that are inside of them. However, in this case, droppers are still much better, especially in these small numbers, than uh, chests with hoppers. Because for a chest hole-like setup, we would need 2 chests for each item, because we will need 1 chest for items and 1 chest for shulker boxes if we want to have the same convenience of being able to either take out items or boxes. And we certainly don't want to break them manually. Like, that's one of the big requirements. We don't want to do anything manually in this storage. And the second thing about the chest hole-like setup, since you need 2, you basically require 1 hopper and a double chest twice for each of each item type. That means that's like, let's say 6. Well, let's not count this filtering hopper. So for this one, it's 7 droppers. For the second idea of using just chests, that would be like 5 tile entities. Maybe the double chest would count as 1, so just 3. But you add still 1 hopper that you need to lock, and the double chests would have to be placed in a somehow insane way, because there's no way you can even reach 10 items per slice if you need 2 chests for 1 item, and certainly no chance you would ever get 14 items per slice. So you would reduce the density, or you would need to attach chests with hoppers to something like this machine. That would be the better option. That would just convert these 7 droppers into 1 double chest and 1 more hopper, because you need the 1 hopper to put the items into a pipe that transfers them to the player. Because you need a way to take out items from a double chest, and the only way to do it is to use a hopper. Yeah, that would again mean a hopper that you need to unlock at the right times, or possibly have it unlocked all the time, which is definitely not worth these droppers. The second option that we could consider would be to not use double chests like in a traditional design, but use some sort of bulk storage, or some storage like this using droppers, and use a binary request system for each item type. So behind each of these buttons you would have a binary encoder that would send a pulse through. You would certainly need instant rail lines that would then send that information to a huge array of binary decoders, which would then send the right shulker box back into, for example, this dispenser here. The issue with that again would be you would either need a really long line like this for each slice if you want to keep this system in these slices, or you would need to use hoppers and one like crazy long dropper line, and in each slice you would have like one hopper that takes out the item from the super long pipe. The problem with that, you would have several hundred block long multiple uh, instant rail lines. That's a huge number of updates when you press one button that happen instantly. Also, binary decoders are also not instant, so you will still not get the box instantly, and you need to transfer it back. That's another instant line. So you could cut down on the time of these further away boxes. I doubt you could make this much faster, like because this already behaves almost like an instant line, which is which will likely not help a lot. And the biggest downside to that would be you would need a way to convert, if you want to keep the same density, these 7 inputs, for example, or even 5, like let's say we only want to take 5, into the binary encoders. That's a bit problematic because you cannot have instant lines right next to each other because they will update each other. And we need about 10 bits for 1000 different items. That means you would, from each of these observers, you would need a 20 block long line of rails and more observers just to do the encoding into binary. I'm afraid that would first of all cause some delay, and secondly would be quite gigantic. Like you would probably need it to be like this long, 7 or 5 times above each other, should make it quite gigantic, and that would be without any of these sorters. And then you would also need some complicated logic, which is probably the biggest problem, to determine how to send the box into the proper slice, because you would need to encode the signal and then you would need to somehow unlock the line at the right position or do something more with the signal from these uh, observers, which would make it even larger. Like you would already have probably like this large part just to do this stuff. Like, and then you would also need the things that send the items back. That would mean basically a slice like this one. Here you would have your droppers, and then you would have uh, one of those binary decoders at the end. Those things have quite some issues because they are using pistons, and if you would accidentally unlock one of these decoders, not unlock, unload one of these decoders at the wrong moment, you would first of all break it, and second, you could even change it to a different signal. So you could have two decoders next to each other, for example, that would activate at the same signal just because you unloaded the thing at the wrong moment. Like, you can break this current design here if you uh, unlock it when these pistons are moving. However, that's way less of an issue because this part basically resets with a box of the right item. So the worst thing you could have, you would load this up with with incorrect boxes. That's really not such a devastating issue like having a machine that is pretty much permanently set to work in a different way. This at least self resets. Also, this clock self resets, so it's not a huge deal. And even and this clock would also be running permanently, so it's not like a huge issue even if you remove this piston altogether. However, the binary design, when you unload it, at the wrong moment, like I said, you break the decoding part, and if you do not know the exact combination of droppers or whatever parts you are moving or blocks that you are moving in the right position, you could even run through it, check the machine, and still not notice the mistake. And that's really dangerous to have. I'll just say hello to activation. And that's probably my biggest concern with binary decoders. Not that it wouldn't work, like I'm sure it would, but it would make the whole stage many times larger. It would probably have to be longer, so you basically lose the advantage of the density unless you somehow curve the instant rails to go above you, which then has the disadvantage that once you start updating too much stuff at the same time, you may even hit the tile tick limit, which is about 65,000. That's only 65 different blocks per item type that are activated at the same time. If you think about it, you have instant relay that's at least 1000 blocks long, then you probably need double that for the decoders of the and all of the encoder parts that will be like 20 blocks. Then you have uh, then you have the line, which let's say you are amazing at building and find some sort of crazy way to do it. Let's say that's 4 blocks, and then then you have another 20, 30 blocks for the decoders. That's getting really, really close to the maximum limit, and also activating even 20,000 things at the same time will probably cause some lag spikes, especially when you like just want to come to this and just spam the button as quickly as you can. And I probably something broke it. Probably how the guys were changing the tick rate, but that doesn't matter. Maybe I was pressing these buttons too quickly after each other before, but that's not a huge deal. So if you would want to take out like 20 boxes of something, normally you just click 20 times. With a binary design, you would activate, you would probably cause several milliseconds, maybe even a second of a lag after each button press 20 times. That would be really annoying for the other players on the server. And it would have also probably the same response time to this machine. So yeah, that's about it for this design and why I didn't do some other versions. This here, I don't know why people didn't notice it. This will be the thing that handles the items that are rare enough to be inputted by the player. If I remember correctly, Burning Brimstone did some testing with it, and he basically just came to the conclusion that it works, and the only disadvantage is like with all shulker box fillers that you don't have perfect timing with zero tick pulses. That means this is not exactly double speed, but that's acceptable. Like we can easily make a clock that just slows down the item input, which is, he even tried some designs here where he used, I think he replaced the trapdoor that I used there with an observer, but that has some other disadvantages, I think. Or maybe it was ugly. I'm not exactly sure. But this is a very, very compact double speed box filler that does not place the box in the right slice, like it could fly to the side, for example, like here, to fly into this hopper if, for example, the box next to it gets broken at the same time or something like that. And the hopper here is also going to the side, which basically makes sure that the items just flow into something like this huge interface. This is also just the interface part, actually. This is like your uh, chest hold in a binary storage. This is not bulk storage. I'm currently working on that, but I will likely first build this since it's not that hard to add a bulk storage to this. We just need some variable shulker box filters, basically something like this, but instead of being set permanently to a item, it will basically send itself to the first item that comes through, and once no items come through it for some time and the droppers or chests or whatever we will use gets emptied, it will allow the machine to switch to a different item type. But we can also just use a really simple bulk storage, which will basically be just a lot of double chests that will fill with uh, the boxes that went through this storage and didn't end up being sorted, which is also an option. Like, that would be less efficient but way easier to build, and probably be enough, because then we could also come and inspect what we have stored in the bulk storage. So if someone for some random reason wants to take out 500 boxes of anything, he can do it just through the bulk storage faster. So yeah, I think that's about it for this video. You will certainly see this being built in on Prototech. Probably not this design, maybe. Maybe I find something better, maybe someone else finds out how to make this even better, even faster, even less laggy or something like that. As you can see, this is just one slice, so you can easily build it from me just flying around it like this, or even from probably from the thumbnail if you really want to be efficient and not watching my videos. So please like this video, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss my other videos, comment down any suggestions for improvements or mistakes that you have noticed, and see you in the next video. Bye!